Equals there are rules for using the bathroom in my apartment. I finally understand why. When I first moved into the apartment on Elm Street, I thought the landlord was just eccentric. Mrs. Chen was a thin woman in her 70s with kind eyes that seemed to hold secrets she'd rather not share. She handed me the keys with trembling fingers and a typewritten list of rules. "Please," she said, her accent thick but her English precise. "You must follow these exactly. For your safety." I glanced at the paper, expecting the usual tenant nonsense about noise complaints and garbage disposal. Instead, I found something far more peculiar: bathroom rules, apartment 4B1. Never use the bathroom between 3:17 a.m. and 3:23 a.m. 2. Always knock 3 times before entering, even if you live alone. 3. If the mirror shows a reflection that isn't yours, leave immediately. 4. Never respond if you hear someone calling your name from inside when you're outside the bathroom. 5. The shower curtain must remain closed when not in use. 6. If the water runs red, do not investigate. Wait until morning. 7. Keep a glass of water on the bathroom counter at all times. 8. Never look directly into the drain. I laughed nervously. Is this some kind of joke? Mrs. Chen's expression remained grave. The previous tenant ignored the rules. We found him 3 days later. She paused, studying my face. He was found in the bathroom. The coroner said he'd been trying to claw his way through the mirror. The rent was $500 below market rate. In this city, that meant I'd overlook just about anything, including an eccentric landlord's bathroom superstitions. I signed the lease that afternoon. The first few weeks passed normally. I followed the rules mostly out of amusement, treating them like a quirky game. Knocking 3 times before entering felt silly, but it became routine. I kept a glass of water on the counter, replacing it when it got dusty. The shower curtain stayed closed. I never had reason to use the bathroom during the forbidden 6-minute window between 3:17 and 3:23 a.m., so that rule remained untested. It was in my 3rd week that I first noticed something unusual. I'd gotten up around 2 a.m. to use the bathroom, following my usual routine of 3 knocks before entering. As I washed my hands, I glimpsed movement in my peripheral vision. When I looked directly at the mirror, everything appeared normal, just my tired face staring back. But I could have sworn, for just a moment, that my reflection had been doing something different. Something I wasn't doing. I chalked it up to exhaustion and went back to bed, but sleep came uneasily. The glass of water began emptying faster than evaporation could explain. At first, I assumed I was simply forgetting when I'd last refilled it. But I started paying closer attention, refilling it each morning and checking throughout the day. By evening, it would be half empty. By the next morning, completely dry. I mentioned it to my neighbor, Marcus, when we crossed paths in the hallway. "Oh, you're in 4B, he said, his friendly expression shifting. "How's it going with, you know?" He gestured vaguely toward my door. "With what?" Marcus glanced around the empty hallway and lowered his voice. "The bathroom situation. Did Chen give you the rules?" My stomach tightened. "You know about the rules. Everyone in the building knows. We've all heard things. Late at night." He shifted uncomfortably. "The guy before you, David, nice guy, really quiet. Toward the end, though, he got paranoid. Started telling people the bathroom was trying to communicate with him. Said he could hear voices in the pipes." "What happened to him?" Marcus shook his head. "Found dead in the bathroom. Door was locked from the inside. They had to break it down." He paused. "The weird thing was, the mirror was completely shattered, but from the inside out. Like something had been trying to break through from behind it. That night, I found myself staring at the bathroom rules again. Mrs. Chen's typewriter had left slight impressions in the paper, and I noticed something I'd missed before, faint text beneath the main list, as if she'd written multiple versions. Holding it up to the light, I could make out fragments of earlier rules: must never let it know you can see, the water is an offering, not, if it begins to mimic your voice. I tried to convince myself it was just a trick of the light, shadows making meaningless marks seem like words. But the seed of unease had been planted. The next morning, I found the bathroom door open, though I distinctly remembered closing it. The shower curtain was pulled back, revealing the bathtub in broad daylight. I approached cautiously, remembering Rule 8 about not looking directly into the drain. But I couldn't help myself. The drain looked normal, a standard circular grate with darkness beneath. Yet as I stared, I began to see patterns in that darkness. Not shapes, exactly, but an almost imperceptible movement, like something breathing just out of sight. I quickly pulled the shower curtain closed and refilled the water glass, noting that it was bone dry again. Work became difficult to focus on. I found myself researching the building's history during lunch breaks, digging through old newspaper archives and city records. The building was constructed in 1962, nothing particularly notable about that. But I did find a pattern of unusual incidents over the years, specifically in apartment 4B. 1987, tenant found drowned in an empty bathtub. 1995, tenant discovered in bathroom after wellness check, cause of death listed as unexplained cardiac event. 2003, tenant moved out after 3 weeks, citing persistent nightmares and bathroom-related anxiety. 2009, tenant hospitalized for severe dehydration, claimed bathroom was stealing his water. 2016, tenant found deceased in bathroom, multiple lacerations on hands consistent with clawing at mirror. That last entry was David, my predecessor. I started avoiding the bathroom as much as possible, using the one at work whenever I could. But eventually, bodily needs forced me home. It was during my 4th week that I first heard my name. I was in the kitchen making dinner when it happened, a voice from the bathroom calling, "Hello," in a tone that sounded almost exactly like mine. Then, clearer, "Hey, can you help me?" My blood ran cold as I remembered Rule 4, never respond if you hear someone calling your name from inside when you're outside the bathroom. The voice came again, more insistent. I think something's wrong with the faucet. It was definitely my voice, but with subtle differences, a slight echo, words ending just a fraction of a second too early. I turned up the TV volume and tried to ignore it, but the voice persisted for nearly an hour, alternating between my voice and others I didn't recognize. Sometimes it would sound urgent, claiming there was an emergency. Other times it would sound casual, asking mundane questions about my day. The worst part was when it started saying things I'd never said, in my voice. Personal thoughts I'd never spoken aloud, embarrassing memories, fears I'd never shared with anyone. As if something had been listening to not just my voice, but my mind. By week 5, I'd developed an elaborate routine to minimize bathroom contact. I'd knock 3 times, enter quickly, do what I needed, and leave without looking at the mirror or drain. I refilled the water glass obsessively, sometimes 3 or 4 times a day. But the rules were becoming harder to follow. The mirror started showing inconsistencies regularly now. I'd catch glimpses of my reflection moving independently, scratching at something, or turning to look at something that wasn't there. Once, I swore I saw my reflection mouth the word, "help," while I was brushing my teeth. The voices became more frequent and more sophisticated. They'd learned to mimic not just my voice, but conversation patterns, saying things like, "Hey, it's me," or "Are you there," in perfectly natural tones. Sometimes they'd mimic voices of friends or family members, though the words never quite made sense. I started keeping a journal of incidents, partially for my own sanity and partially because I was beginning to understand that documenting this might be important for whoever came after me. Week 6, Day 2, water glass empty again by noon, though I filled it at 8 a.m. Found the shower curtain open despite closing it. Noticed dark stains around the drain that weren't there yesterday. Week 6, Day 5, reflection was facing the wrong direction for approximately 3 seconds. When I blinked, it corrected itself. Voice asked me about childhood pets I've never owned. Week 7, Day 1, woke up at 3:19 a.m. needing desperately to use bathroom. Waited until 3:24, following rules. During those 5 minutes, heard what sounded like multiple people having a conversation inside the bathroom. Could not make out words, but definitely heard laughter. It was during week 7 that I made my first real mistake. I'd been following the 3:17 to 3:23 rule religiously, but I'd never really understood why those specific times mattered. One night, curiosity got the better of me. I set my alarm for 3:15 a.m. and positioned myself outside the bathroom door. At exactly 3:17, I began to hear sounds. First, the faucet turning on, though the water had a different quality, heavier, almost viscous. Then footsteps, but not on the tile floor. They sounded like someone walking on something soft and wet. At 3:19, the mirror began to vibrate gently, creating a low humming sound. I pressed my ear to the door and could hear what sounded like whispered conversations, multiple voices overlapping but none quite intelligible. 3:21 brought the sound of the shower curtain being pulled back and forth repeatedly, accompanied by splashing that seemed too loud for the small bathtub. At 3:22, everything went silent except for a gentle tapping, like fingernails on glass, rhythmic and patient. When 3:23 arrived, all sound stopped immediately, as if someone had flipped a switch. I waited another minute before knocking 3 times and entering. Everything appeared normal, but the water glass was not just empty, it was bone dry, as if it had been sitting in a desert for hours. The mirror had a strange warmth to it, and when I breathed near it, it didn't fog up like it should have. That's when I noticed the smell. It was subtle at first, like damp earth or standing water. But as days passed, it grew stronger. The bathroom began to smell like something organic and old, something that had been wet for too long in a dark place. Week 8 brought a new development. The bathroom started retaining occupants. Not me, I was always able to leave when I wanted. But others. I began hearing sounds at all hours that suggested someone was using the bathroom when I knew I was alone. Shower running, toilet flushing, cabinet doors opening and closing. When I'd work up the courage to check, the bathroom would be empty, but there would be evidence: wet towels I hadn't used, toiletries moved to different positions, steam on the mirror despite the shower being dry. The voices became more sophisticated, too. They learned to mimic entire phone conversations, playing out both sides of calls I'd never made. They'd repeat conversations I'd had at work, but with subtle changes that made them unsettling. Wrong names, altered details, emotions that didn't match the original context. I tried to research the rules themselves, wondering if Mrs. Chen had inherited them from a previous owner or if she developed them through experience. When I managed to catch her in the lobby, she seemed reluctant to discuss it. Have other tenants had problems following the rules? I asked. She studied me carefully, noting the dark circles under my eyes, my increasingly thin appearance. You are following them, yes? Yes, but I'm curious about their origin. David asked many questions too, she interrupted. Always wanting to understand the why instead of accepting the what. Her expression grew sad. Understanding does not make it better. Understanding makes it notice you more. That night, I dreamed I was in the bathroom, but it was impossibly large. The mirror stretched up beyond sight, and my reflection was having a conversation with other reflections I couldn't see. When I tried to leave, the door was gone. I spent hours in the dream looking for an exit while my reflection pointed and laughed. I woke up to find wet footprints leading from the bathroom to my bed. By week 9, I realized the bathroom wasn't just haunted or cursed, it was intelligent. And it was studying me. The mimicry had become perfect. The voices now could reproduce not just my speech patterns but my thought patterns. They'd ask questions I was thinking, make observations about my day that were accurate in ways that should have been impossible. The reflection began showing me things before I did them. I'd approach the sink, and my reflection would already be washing its hands. I'd reach for the towel, and my reflection would be drying off. It was leading by fractions of a second, as if it knew my intentions before I fully formed them. The water glass situation had evolved too. It wasn't just emptying anymore, it was being emptied strategically. I'd find it full when I was happy, empty when I was stressed. As if something was measuring my emotional state through my hydration needs. I started carrying a small voice recorder, documenting incidents as they happened. But when I played back the recordings, my voice would be saying things I didn't remember saying. Comments about understanding the arrangement and learning to cooperate. Most disturbing was a recording where my voice seemed to be having a conversation with itself. It's not that different from what we were doing before. No, I suppose the transition will be smoother than expected. David fought it. That's why it was so difficult for him. We won't make the same mistake. I had no memory of saying any of it. Week 10 brought the final revelation. I woke up one morning and realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd used a bathroom anywhere else. Not at work, not at restaurants, not at friends' houses. Somehow, I'd been exclusively using the apartment bathroom for weeks without realizing it. More than that, I'd been looking forward to it. The bathroom had become the most comfortable room in the apartment. The mirror always seemed to reflect the most flattering angle. The water pressure was perfect. The temperature was always exactly what I wanted without adjusting the handles. I began to understand what Mrs. Chen had meant about David asking too many questions. The rules weren't arbitrary restrictions, they were a peace treaty. A carefully negotiated agreement between the living and something else, something that resided in the spaces between the mirror and the wall, in the darkness beyond the drain, in the 6 minutes of vulnerability between 3:17 and 3:23 a.m. David had broken the treaty by trying to understand it. And whatever lived there had been forced to recruit a replacement. The water glass wasn't an offering, it was a test of cooperation. The knocking wasn't a warning system, it was a greeting. The shower curtain stayed closed not to hide something, but to give it privacy when it needed to manifest. I understand now why the rent was so far below market rate. The apartment comes with a roommate. An invisible, patient roommate that asks very little, just acknowledgement, just cooperation, just the occasional moment of borrowed identity. I've been here 3 months now, and the arrangement is quite comfortable. My reflection and I have learned to coordinate our movements. The voices and I have found ways to harmonize. The bathroom and I have reached an understanding. Mrs. Chen stopped by yesterday to check on me. She seemed pleased with what she saw. "You look well," she said, though I caught her studying my eyes carefully. "No problems." "None at all," I assured her. "I follow the rules." She nodded approvingly, but I noticed she kept her distance. As if she could sense that while I was following the rules had also been following me. I've started working on a new version of the rules list. More complete. More accurate. With better explanations of what happens when you don't follow them. The next tenant will need proper guidance. After all, David's approach was far too traumatic for everyone involved. When my replacement arrives, I want the transition to be smoother. More cooperative. I understand now that the bathroom doesn't want to hurt anyone. It just wants company. Understanding. Someone willing to share the space respectfully. Someone who won't mind that their reflection occasionally moves independently, or that voices sometimes borrow their vocal cords, or that the 6 minutes between 3:17 and 3:23 a.m. belong to something else entirely. Someone who won't ask too many questions about why the water glass empties itself, or why the drain sometimes breathes, or why the mirror occasionally shows rooms that aren't quite the same as the one you're standing in. The rent really is reasonable, considering what you get in return. I just need to find someone suitable. Someone who won't fight the arrangement like David did. Someone who understands that some rules exist not to restrict us, but to help us coexist. I've been placing ads online, describing the apartment in careful terms. Emphasizing the below-market rent, the quiet neighborhood, the responsive landlord. I don't mention the bathroom situation directly. That would scare people away unnecessarily. But I make sure to include Mrs. Chen's contact information. She'll handle the rules explanation when they're ready to sign the lease. After all, it's important that the next tenant understand exactly what they're agreeing to. Just like I finally do.